My autistic son named this video Take 173. Okay, it's not Take 173. It feels like it though. I did not realize this video was going to be so difficult to make. It is so easy to go off on tangents, so I am going to try to narrow my focus a little bit here, like my son would, and just try to get on with the content. First off, this is not an ASMR video, although it is soft spoken. And the purpose of this video is basically just to tell you everything that I've learned about managing stress, my own personal stress, through my son. If you've watched my videos, you already know it was my son who introduced me to ASMR. So right away, he's dealt with most of my stress just by doing that. I can't believe how much anxiety has just disappeared over the last, I guess it's 3 years now, just because he introduced me to Bob Ross. So let me check that one from the list. ASMR. Done. Thank you, Luke. The title of this video: What I Learned from My Autistic Son. I don't like the name of that. I don't like the title of this video. However, he's the one that chose it. I don't like saying my autistic son. I would rather say my son who has autism. I don't like identifying the individual as autistic because that's not, the label is not who the person is. I wouldn't say somebody with bipolar disorder is bipolar, because now you're identifying the individual with the bipolar and kind of excluding their whole personality and just focusing on the bipolar. And the same with all of the other mental health and other diseases out there. I don't say that somebody is cancer. I say somebody has cancer, and there's a huge difference. But if there's one thing that I learned about my son, that's to respect his preferences. And if he wants that title for a video, that is exactly what the title for the video is going to be. And I don't have to disagree with it, and I'm sure we're going to be talking about this a lot more in the future. But it's more important to respect an individual than to just steamroll over them. And that is something else that I've learned from my son too. He had a lot of challenges in growing up. There were a lot of meltdowns. He had an awful lot of stress that he didn't know how to cope with. And having autism can make it difficult to learn those coping mechanisms. So now that he's an adult, he has a lot to teach me because he had to learn from the School of Hard Knocks. And I think it would be pretty silly of me not to listen to him because he's the pro. He has had way more experience in dealing with stress and anxiety than I will ever have in my whole life. And he learned at a very young age, unfortunately, what that was all about. But we're here now, and we can't change the past, and we can only roll with the future. And my son and I both choose to live in the moment and move on from here. And maybe that's something else that I've learned from my son, is that owning the past doesn't accomplish anything, and it's just a cause for more stress. So, point 2. stress in new situations. When I walk into something I don't know, I wind up being so stressed because I'm not sure how to behave or how to act. I think a lot of us go through this, especially if it's the unknown. So I've taken a page from my son's book. I call it scripting, and I've heard this used in the neurodiverse community in the past. Scripting is when you walk into a situation with other people and you already have the script in mind, and you go with that script and let it carry out, and hopefully by the time that script runs out you have found commonalities, or you've found that point in which you're able to relax and just carry on from there. It works 99% of the time. And what I do with my script is, when I walk into a situation or with an individual that I don't know, my script involves finding commonalities with an individual so that we have something to carry on the conversation. It's quite amazing because I've met so many incredible people just from scripting that little bit and finding those commonalities. I've actually made friends that way, even in non-friend-like situations, like when I'm at work, or if I'm meeting an individual client or patient for the very first time. Finding those commonalities will really help establish either a friendship, or with a client, a therapeutic relationship. Now that 1% where it doesn't work, it's like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do now? It's like you kind of stare off blankly and you're thinking, oh, I like cheese. Or whatever, something stupid will fall out of my mouth. And then we laugh, usually. So, scripting as a way to cope with stress when you're walking into a situation that you're not quite sure about. And my son has told me that this is something that he has done frequently, and it works for him. We get a good chuckle out of talking about our different coping mechanisms, and I think that the two of us learn from each other, and we actually have quite a good chuckle over it sometimes, especially when the coping mechanisms fall apart. But life is not going to be perfect, right? And you have to just learn to roll with it and laugh over past mistakes. So, going over my script here and going to the next bullet. This is so basic. Hang around people who are friends and be able to identify what a friend is. I think this goes back to when I was growing up and hanging around people just for the sake of having company, because that was just the right thing to do. We socialize ourselves. That's not necessarily the right thing to do. It took me decades to learn that I am an introvert. You can stop laughing now. Anybody who knows me on Twitter knows how verbose and loud and out there I am in social forums. And even the individuals that I work with, the staff at the facility that I work at, they see somebody who is more outgoing and outspoken. And yet, it couldn't be further from the truth. I am so totally an introvert outside of work. And all those years of trying to socialize myself and making myself into someone that I wasn't. Um, so I spent thousands of dollars on counseling to learn that it's totally okay to not want to be with an awful lot of people and to feel awkward in social situations in which there are like a million people around. You don't have to do that to yourself. It's okay to not be around individuals. And if you like spending a lot of your time alone, which I do, that is totally okay. There's no such thing as a norm when it comes to socializing. And I wish that parents of people who have autism would not work so hard at trying to change their children. It's just going to result in meltdowns or negative coping mechanisms. Um, the one, the one thing that I see parents doing that really bothers me is, hey, my eyes. Look at my eyes when I'm talking to you. Yes, you can teach somebody with autism to look you in the eyes when they're talking to you. What you probably don't understand is how much energy that takes to do that, how much stress it causes, and that will never change. 30, 40 years later, they're looking you in the eye and they're still completely stressed and they're not processing what you're actually saying to them. By getting them to look you in the eye, you're making them not listen to you, which is so counterintuitive to what we've been taught growing up. So that is something that I've learned from my son as well. Do what you need to do in order to absorb the communication, to be able to process the material that is coming in. There is no one way that is correct to communicate. There are wrong ways to communicate. And the whole look me in the eye is the wrong way for somebody who has autism. And I hope that people will not try to force that upon individuals. If you have and you didn't know any better, it's not your fault. It's society's fault. That's just the way we were raised, basically. That's what we are taught as normal. Normal is so overrated. Okay. The next bullet. Don't micromanage. If there's one thing that will stress somebody out is when you are hovering over them and you're micromanaging everything that you do. If you're a boss, if you're a manager, your job is to surround yourself with people who know what their job is. And when you micromanage somebody, it means you failed. And it's the same thing in life with micromanaging all of the people around you in your family and shooting all over them and telling them what they need to do. This and this is wrong and this is right and this is the way to do it. No, there are a million ways to do things the correct way. But your perception of what is correct is not necessarily in line with other people's perception as to what is correct. And it's totally okay to disagree with me because I'm not going to micromanage you. Okay, so that one. How to handle your anxiety. One thing I've noticed with my son is movement. He's always in a constant state of movement. There are a couple of things that this can represent. One is what they call stimming, and it could serve a couple of different purposes. One is to block out stimuli from your environment so that you can manage your stress. And another is that you don't have enough stimuli in your environment, and so you need to create that stimuli in order to be able to cope better. What this translates to in my own life is when I get those anxious feelings inside me, actually stepping outside and going for a walk, getting some exercise. Something so basic is such a great stress reliever. And most North Americans, most people in the Western world, dismiss exercise. It's such a great way to cope. And you'll find that if you do go out for that walk, or you do go for that workout, okay, you've taken half an hour to 45 minutes of your day. And you might perceive it as a waste of time, but you're going to find that your productivity level skyrockets. And you're going to be doing a lot of those tasks either at work or in your daily life. You'll be doing them so much faster and saving yourself so much time and getting healthier at the same time. Okay, so let's get rid of that bullet. Owning other people's stuff. Guilty. Owning other people's stuff is just a way to put incredible amounts of stress on you. And there are people out there who will try to put all of their stuff on you. Know what is yours. Know when it's okay to walk away. Know your limitations. I sound like so much of a hypocrite to myself right now. As a nurse, sometimes my automatic go-to is to fix something. And you really need to listen to people, because sometimes they don't want to be fixed. They want to be heard. I make that mistake frequently. And if you're watching this video and I've done that to you in the past, I'm apologizing to you right now. And I think that it is something that comes from being a nurse and wanting to fix something when I see that the answer can be so obvious to me. But again, it goes down to my reality isn't necessarily somebody else's. So that's something that I have to work on with myself. And being able to identify when you have to work on something is something that my son has taught me as well. My son is so open to ideas, and we will have discussions that last for hours on different topics. And it's great that we can have such diverging views and never fight about it. It never leads to an argument. We just keep our minds open and keep ourselves willing to change. He has changed my mind in so many different things. He's a vast reservoir of knowledge when it comes to political science. And we have our different belief systems. I think that his are extreme, and I think that mine are extreme. And I know that politics and ASMR don't mix, so that's as far as I'm going to be going into it, okay? But through constant conversations with my son, I've learned that it's really important to keep an open mind about everything that is happening. All of this is just the tip of the iceberg. My son is an incredible lad. It's difficult for me to call him a man, but that is exactly what he is now. And he has taught me so much. I wish I could tell you everything, but there's no way that I could fit it into a YouTube video or 100 YouTube videos. If you don't have autism, my message to you is to listen. If you do know someone with autism, know how to listen. If you ask a question and they don't answer you right away, be patient. The answer might come the next day, or they might leave and they might go home, and then you'll get a text and, yeah, I really enjoyed that, and you might get your answer there. But processing can be different from individual to individual, whether you have autism or not. And I've learned that I need to be patient with my son, and I really need to listen. People who are neurotypical, non-autistic, we've been raised a certain way, and we have all of these social norms and social mores that are just constructs of our society and are meaningless. They really mean nothing. And to be able to step into the world of autism and to learn that there are other ways to communicate has been very enlightening. Autism is a communication disorder. Is it? When I have a conversation with someone, I have to look at them. I have to look at their body language. I have to look at their affect on their face, the volume, the tone of voice. My son, Dad, that was great. Message delivered. And we say that people with autism have the communication disorder. Good night from Ontario.